Vice Chair Select Board. Yeah, Hunter.
Bruce Rockwood.
Leah Bucky.
And call him Bruce. Sherry.
Sorry, Sage.
We were on page 3, page 4 of the memo, mentioned briefly that just highlighting the top 10 increases and decreases, in the proposed budget. None less the capital is its own separate item. Just reflecting the operating portion of the budget. We were talking about on page 5, the distribution of expense, so to speak, in percentages, and where some of those costs are living in certain cost centers. The chart at the bottom there, figure 2, just kind of shows you what the last 5 years on a simple line chart has looked like, for both the capital and the operating budget. You see the operating budget is at a slightly higher trajectory than the capital has been, and having a much larger share of the overall expenditures. For what it's worth, did try and quantify what the operating budget, or what the overall increase looks like in terms of kind of tax implications there on page 5. For every $100,000 of assessed value, using this year's total taxable values, property values, would be $52.83 more per $100,000. $1,000 more, about $150 more, is represented with this budget. Again, it does not include provider agencies, it does not include school, it does not include county. And it only assumes that we don't increase in taxable value from new construction or through a factor change on the base values. For general government, covers the administration, assessing, planning and department, solid waste, municipal building, contingency account, legal services, insurance, and then general assistance. You'll see there in table 3 where some of the major drivers are for this particular cost center. Biggest one being EV chargers. This is our estimated expenditure for this, for the power cost for the year. There's also being assumed that there's a direct offset with revenue. They are projected to not cost us money, but until we get into the height of the season and understand what that electricity rates are going to be, CMP, if you're not familiar, has about 20 different rate structures based on its demand for power. So if you get all late chargers being utilized at the same time and max demand load is there, it's going to be a different rate structure than what we're in right now. And so we estimate what it's going to be. Our projections are hopefully high, but what the fee in which we're charging folks to utilize those should offset the cost. So it on its surface looks like it's a big expense, and it is, but it should have direct offsetting and hopefully net positive for the town.
So people swipe a card when they
Card,
charge.
app, whatever there's a couple different ways in which people would pay the fee. The first 45 days roughly went in service middle of December. The select board had an update at the last meeting. I think it's netted about $600 so far for the lowest use months of the year probably.
So does the user who's charging at peak times pay the higher amount, or are we
the
charging?
same kilowatt hour for the whole time of day.
Okay,
We aren't getting charged a different fee for the peak versus the off peak. The rate structure we're gonna end up in isn't set up that way. There are some that would provide that option, but for the first year, we're gonna be in what they call a medium service user, medium MSG account. So it's just a slightly different structure that way, but it's the same 35 cents per kilowatt hour fee. There's additional $3 an hour if you're idle or beyond the 3-hour limit during the hours of like 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. We've got to set up, and then overnight there's not a fee for someone that's plugged in longer than 3 hours overnight, but they're still paying the 35 cents kilowatt hour.
Andy?
Yeah.
What is the main council of government's role in the site plan review?
We'll get into that a little bit more detail,
Okay.
with the planning department.
Okay,
In hot big picture, they're assisting in the site plan review, process, driven by the ordinance. Takes a pretty substantial administrative lift, depending on the application and project scope.
okay,
So we're.
and that's already contracted?
At the moment, it's already contracted, yeah. Other big increase, solid waste contract, you see is up 21,000, a little over 21,000. You'll see health insurance, another one where there's employees and multiple employees in a particular department. You might be in tune with what some of those increases are across the board, this year. In November, we had mentioned the state had announced about a 22 or 4% expected increase in some of their plan options. Our insurance carrier came in, I think, at 9% roughly, for calendar year 26. And then we're estimating 4.5%, for calendar year 27. That, not a lot of big decreases. There are some other ones. This is a little the biggest two on their legal service and payroll liabilities. With that,
Don't skip ahead, Tom.
I might skip ahead to the ones we're gonna discuss tonight. I'll show page 11, just a high overview of all of the, cost centers on the warrant, about the capital budget. Again, same chart you saw on the earlier page, the inclusion of a bar graph kind of showing, the proposed budget. And those three lines there. Remember what those are. I think it was trying to show 26 and then the two 27 lines. You'll see the department request is preserved there at the top of on page 11, in the column on the all the way to the right, the proposal. Where there are some differences where I'm anticipating we'll spend a little more time discussing.
Can we assume year to date is December, 6 months?
Year to date, I believe, Cheryl, we had gone through December with that. So for some costs, it might be the full like equal 50% or 6 months. In other cases, it might be close. But yeah, we tried to kind of make it so it was the 50% mark.
Okay.
Oh,
19.
yeah, pages, well, through 14, your cost centers, a little more detailed by line. 15 and 16, you get into some of the projected revenues. I think that was the first thing I'll quickly might cover on our review. Last year, we talked about it, but didn't get into great detail with it.
Talk about revenue.
I'd included it on some of those department pages in the summary. It's not how we've been applying revenue. Typically, the revenue is just one lump. It will likely still be one lump on the warrant article. But where there are direct offsets to certain departments, I thought it was helpful for folks to kind of see that mapped out. This is just one summary view of all of the revenues that we account for in a year. The object line or column is where it's kind of being mapped. Department line, obvious. So it's just showing you where some of those are. Some of our biggest non-tax revenues, auto excise, $500,000. The fund balance is its own. I kind of bolded that. It's not necessarily a revenue line. It's utilization of our undesignated fund balance. You see some of the amounts we've used the last few years have stayed the same at 150,000. For all intents and purposes, it's viewed as revenue. You see the addition there about 3/4 of the way down on page 15 of the EV chargers. Again, the direct offset without getting too ambitious on any net income from that endeavor, but at the very least, we're projecting it certainly to break even, and hopefully we shared the numbers. It looked like we would certainly be in the positive and be able to fund future replacement or significant upkeep of those without a direct taxpayer impact. Some of our other biggest earners for revenue the last couple of years has been the interest on the bank accounts, with a pretty significant balance in the bank usually. You see there in 24, 25.
Which line? Yeah, which line?
Well, they're not numbered, but on page 15, about close to halfway down, administration interest on accounts.
Okay.
$396,000 and then some in 24 fiscal year and 165,000 in 25. Year to date's at 109,000. Those are not numbers that we were projecting. You typically, I mean, when you went back to 2021, 22, 23, interest rates were less than a 1%. Even with a big balance, it wasn't huge monies. The rates we had with the bank were such that it changed as the index we were tied to changed. And with DB&T, we were getting 0.25% above the effective Fed fund rate, reset every month. So we were just over 5% for a few months. Things were really good. Banking services went out to bid last year. We, based on the results, I think with 6 responses, we switched over to Bath savings for our accounts. And that's also tied to an index. We thought that was an intriguing model based on what was there. We also offered the option of a fixed rate, of which one bank offered a fixed rate for the 3-year period. I don't know exactly where the rate stands right now, but I believe we were 100% of whatever index they had tied it to. It wasn't the effective Fed fund rate, it was a different one. But we'll monitor that and get it. It does make it really hard to predict what that revenue is gonna be.
So Andy, I understand you want to be conservative in your revenue.
Yep.
When we're doing the planning, but this seems to be really conservative, your proposal of $75,000 when we've already posted 109 so far this year. And
Yeah,
it
you'll
looks
see.
like in the past we've done that. Have our account values gone down so much, or are you just being really conservative?
I'm being really conservative. You see, the department requests at 120,000.
Yeah,
If
that
someone's
seems
got the
reasonable.
crystal ball, I'd love to see it. If we fall short on revenue, that generally gonna mean we're gonna, during the year, be mindful and have to cut the expenditures. If we underestimate it, it falls to fund balance if there is extra. And so, yes, exactly, it's, you know, something maybe somewhere in between those. I was definitely more on the conservative side because we're talking 16 months out. You know, revenue for 16 months out. I don't know what that's gonna look like.
Does it post monthly, the interest on accounts?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll expect more this year.
More than what we budgeted. Yeah, and we're already.
We only budgeted
Very good.
50, so we're
Right.
kind of blowing that one out of the water.
Right, the rates have been kind of going down, and I don't know what comes up in 16 months out. We gotta go through June of 27 with these numbers. But yes, that's, I think, as you think about that, if there's a recommendation to, say roll the dice, but I mean, be a little more less conservative in that estimate, certainly make that recommendation. Probably the only other next biggest revenue line for us is more of a lump with just the planning and development fees related to permits, site plan review. Also in there is the revenue from the marijuana licensing. There's a 4th one that's working on getting a license and set up in town. That'd be $20,000. It's $5,000 each. There's an allowance for 4, so it'll be the first time I think the town's had all 4 licenses issued. So yeah.
And that's annual?
That-
And that's annual?
That's annual.
Great.
Did we
So,
pass that?
yes,
Thank you.
so do the selectmen review the permit schedule, the fees for the various permits, the schedules?
Generally, and in theory, yes, it's been a couple of years.
Because
It
it
is
seems
on our
that-
radars right now to do that these next few months to make effective for July 1.
I mean, if we're paying all this money for like site location reviews, we should be getting some of that, especially from some of the bigger development projects.
Yeah,
Go ahead, sorry.
these projections take into account the potential for an increase in the fee schedule. The one most notable is the planning and development fees to be raised. You see building permits, it appears we're likely to fall short on the revenue for the permit fees. We're at $6,200 in change this fiscal year so far. We were aiming for 20,000 in revenue. That one might not be met. That said, there's a couple others that are on pace to meet what our projections were. I think overall, I mean, we're being mindful and trying to balance that out, but that 20,000 acknowledges that we're gonna happen. You'll see the note, I believe, in the, when we get to that department. Gonna have to look at that fee schedule, it's been again a few years, 2020 or 2021.
It's been a while, yeah.
Because the plumbing permit fees are strong, you know, consider, like they're at 5820 year to date, and you have allocated budgeted 6,500, but, you know, we're just in, you know, we just started 2026, so
Yeah, so this is halfway through.
halfway through. Okay,
So our
halfway through the
fiscal
fiscal
year,
year.
July to
Yeah.
June.
So what I'm saying is those are still
6
pretty
months.
strong, and they'll probably,
It's very possible that that would end up over, yeah. I mean, there's no necessarily, I mean, all we have to go on is kind of historical trends. You know, these are all driven by building property owners' desire and ability to make improvements.
Yeah.
But yes, that hopefully stays high and we can go. The state sets a minimum fee that they expect to collect, and then we get to keep about, I think it's about 3/4 of the fee. And the town also has an additional per fixture fee that is 100% local. That one. The other ones, like for cost per square foot and the other building fees related to site plan review, and that's entirely set by us and 100% stays in the town.
Before we turn the page, I have a question about parking fines,
Yeah,
since we don't have a parking person.
right.
And we've only collected $50 this year. Are we planning on hiring someone to do tickets or is
That'll be a
that?
discussion tomorrow.
I mean, right now, it's not.
No.
It's a different department, but yeah.
Police
Yeah.
department.
It's, I'm sorry.
and the special detail, is that Pumpkin Fest or?
Most likely the majority of that's Pumpkin Fest, so we don't budget the cost, and the direct payment of the cost we incur is passed on to that.
So they pay.
Curious if when you were redoing the parking lot and working on the parking lot, has there ever been any thought to what, like, city of Portland does, and, you know, you put up, what are those called? The
Yeah.
parking station, you know, and so everybody pays to park.
Third rail.
A lot of conversation.
Yes.
There was a lot of talk about that, okay.
Not more recently,
Not
but
recently,
certainly in the
but-
town's
But it was
history.
like,
Yeah.
never.
There used to be.
It's the people.
Yeah.
Say,
Yeah,
people say whether they want it or not.
it's
Yeah.
been discussed, but there was some pushback, yeah. So,
Not no forever, but it hasn't been a, let's reconsider it recently.
yeah,
Yeah, but I'm just thinking too, some of the locals on down there parking, but in some people. I don't go down there and park in the
you
summer.
could do it seasonally, that's part of the, yeah, there's different ways to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
But the
We have
discussion,
resident parking stickers for people who park in certain areas and.
I mean, it wouldn't,
Yeah, I think it's worth kind of bookmarking that for the discussion when the new chief's in tomorrow, and we talk a little bit about the parking enforcement piece. The ordinance needs to be reviewed and updated anyways, and so I think that'll be something that I've encouraged. He'd like to see something up and running, updated before this spring, and before traffic picks up, in terms of kind of regulating parking where, not what the times are. So there's a lot to think about and engage the community with on that in the coming months. None of that to be set up for an investment in parking meters in that time.
oh,
But nonetheless,
certainly not, right.
it might come up during that discussion.
Thanks.
Not included in some of the revenue offset, as it's related to the budget impact. So I got the state reimbursement section down here on page 16. It's in there, so we can kind of see what it is, but you just need to note those bolded items, the homestead reimbursement, Betty, and revenue sharing. Those are all dictated kind of by the state in what the, what do you call it? The assessor's spring work, and so it's, I know we've got a handful of new homestead applications. It's a state program but these are baked in directly to the tax calculation sheet. And so whereas these other ones are on just a different portion of it, we're accounting for, we're saying this is the revenue we're gonna hit. The state requires that these numbers are used to automatically reduce the tax burden. So they're not money we're raising in the same sense as some of these other ones are. So they're in here, you can see what we're estimating those to be, but revenue sharing, for example, the state usually posts estimated revenue sharing for the upcoming year and sometime in, I think it's either February or March historically. We might get an updated projection in like May, June or July, as their forecast, get a little tighter. And so I don't know what that number is. I think I'm holding this pretty close to the same as it was for this year, not knowing yet, but with any hope that number might go up, using the tax burden just a little bit more.
Has the state legislature changed any of the homestead reimbursement rules?
Not that I'm aware of. There were a few things in there. A lot of that's sort of been or put on hold while they work through the committee they formed. The previous legislature created a committee to look at tax increases and impacts specifically.
Yeah.
It's no secret that the way it's set up in the state of Maine, all of our revenue, majority of our revenue is coming from property tax.
Right.
And the burdens that you've all seen and hear about locally are not unique. And so the legislature is probably one of the bigger complaints they receive across the board from their constituents. So they created a committee to review. It's made up of multiple interests and kind of areas. There's auditors and financial folks on there. There's a couple town managers on there. So they created a kind of a holistic group. And they had an initial report that was due in January. I can't remember if I've seen it yet or not. But so a lot of those things that are direct impacts to the property tax, things like the homestead, I think there were 4 or 5 different bills that were put in that would modify homestead exemption, right, statute. And so they kind of just circled them, grouped them, and set them aside for right now. Right now, we're getting about 76% of that reduction back from the reimbursement from the state. So if at full value, it's $25,000, a reduction of $25,000 off your assessed value. You times that by our mill rate, at full value, we'd be getting 76% of that back for every property we hold. We're not at 100% of the valuation. I think this year something like certified ratio is like 70%, so it's $18,000 what folks have taken off if they're for the homestead value off their tax bill. If we don't do anything for next year's values, it'd be less than $18,000 based on what the state's projection is for what we should be valuing ourselves at. Regardless, it'd still be 76% of whatever that is. So that number could be going down a little bit based solely on that. I don't know how many new applications they have until I think April 1st to submit applications, and so we could get 20 more, we could get no more. But this number could certainly be different. Betty's the personal property business enhancement tax exemption, business equipment tax exemption. And again, that one's relying on up-to-date, honest forms submitted by the property owners that have qualifying personal property. The state reimburses us a portion of that lost revenue because of their exemption program. Then the revenue sharing, collections, which one's that coming from? Sales tax. There's a couple where the revenue sharing, I think, is derived mostly from sales tax. In the state.
Yeah.
And then there's a formula that's kind of complicated and as to what towns get divided and sent to them. We just take the number and we plug it in, and it could be lower in reality.
Do the schools get their own reimbursement from the state?
They get subsidies for certain things.
revenue
The special ed's kind of one of the bigger ones for them. Supposed to be 55%, I think. The special ed costs, I believe, are supposed to be. That's a separate matter, separate.
Yeah.
Do we still have a Department of Education?
State of Maine.
Pages 17 and 18, I just made bigger. It's a slightly more expanded view of page 4 that I had to reprint. I'm trying to put all the top 10 and increases and decreases in one 8.5 by 11, which just wasn't gonna work. So we have a bigger view of that, some context in the comments there for each of those, more than I was provided in the earlier thing. In the interest of any questions on revenue? Any more questions on that? In the interest of letting Michael get his done, so we can
On the planning.
potentially focus on other things if you'd like. If folks are okay, we can jump to page 30. And discuss an overview of some of the planning budget.
Planning, okay. And folks, a reminder too, if you have any questions on any of these line items, or if there's just reference the code. It makes it quick and easy for everybody to kind of follow along, so those are the code on the left hand side, like miscellaneous expenses, 0199. Helpful anyway, so, yeah.
If Michael, if you'd be comfortable, if you want to pop up on the table, maybe,
Michael's in the hot seat. Hop up on the table.
yeah.
Hop up on the table.
Like the whole movement.
Let's put it to a test here. Right.
Hello, I'm Michael Martone, I'm the town planner. We've not met before, I know that.
Hi, Michael.
So, of course, I was just looking through my numbers and double checking them and found a discrepancy, but I think I can still go through this. I wanted to give you some high level stuff first, what I am looking at here. The budget increase, the proposed budget increase is $29,300, a little more. That's up from 193, a little less thousand, up to 222,000. So like I said, it's almost $30,000 increase in expenses. There is a pretty significant amount of revenue that comes in for that department, which I would, in addition to the actual revenue that comes in, probably important to keep in mind that this shows Damariscotta is paying my full salary and compensation when half of it's really paid by Newcastle. So it gets funneled through here so that that budget looks a little increased. It shows up on both sides, so, but I think keeping that in mind is important.
With the Newcastle's part of that, where does that show?
Page 35.
Is it showing revenue or is revenue? Oh.
Yeah, I didn't. The first line of the revenue shows the reimbursement from Newcastle.
Okay.
So the budget increase is just a little under $30,000. The estimated revenue also is up. Good, that's good, and that's up. I want to just double check this. I believe it is up. At least what I'm proposing, $27,000, which should be about 28% over what we budgeted last year. I heard you talking about it before. I imagine we can come back and discuss that if you're interested. But essentially, the revenue's up from 98,000 up to 125,000. And yeah, we can get into that. So altogether, that works out to a cost increase for the department. You know, bottom line here is just under or like $3,600, 3.8% increase. So I think, and this is what I was just looking at, I believe. Well, I'm not going to find it now because we're in the middle of talking about it and I'm nervous. So, but I can tell you that's no, and it's not because I don't think you're all very kind people. You know, groups. Well, like I said, right now I've got it's under $4,000 increase, which would basically be slightly under a 4% increase. So I can double check that and let you know, but what all things considered there. I would like to touch on there's some main the main points of increase here are the budget for softwares is up $10,000. That is, I can tell you, I think the code is 1338 for computer software. So that goes up from, I mean, it's exactly $10,000 what we budgeted. That includes, we talked about this part of it last year, which I'm sure you'll remember some of, and that is a GIS, or basically digital mapping for the town. It's something I use currently in Newcastle, and what it allows is residents to go online and see what parcel they are and see what zone they're in and see what other mapping information we can put on there. And it's also tied to assessing. So you can go on there and see, you know, it's like basically going and looking at the tax maps here in the commitment books. It's just,
Is that what's meant by the civic engagement?
no, so
No.
that's the 7,000 for GIS is what I was
Okay.
talking about. And then there is already there's the $5,600 for ClearGov, which is a strategic plan. Oh, yeah, so this is the Newcastle mapping. And it's also helpful internally because when we're talking to people about what property they have or what they want to do, you know, we can go find it pretty quickly and see very quickly, is it in shoreland, is it not? So saves a little bit of time there too. There's features that we can get into that go beyond that, but that's what I'm talking about with.
So where does this data come from? I mean, is it all state GIS stuff that's downloaded into this?
It depends what we're talking about specifically. Most of it, like a lot of the actual numbers you see off to the side, this is property address, property street, and all of that. That comes straight from our assessing data. Well, that comes straight from Newcastle's assessing data. And we can export that. Well, they export it right from Trio and then upload it to Newcastle, which I believe they can do as often as they want. It tends to be, you know, at least a few months out because that how long it takes for deeds to go through the whole process and the assessors to update things, but it at least keeps that up to date, you know, annually for sure, and then pretty good as often as you want to manually push it over.
So the program updates it, or?
No, you have to, somebody would have to go in and basically tell it to do it, but I don't think it's like a, you know, a big data dump that's gonna take you an hour. I think it's the kind of thing that you can do it in 10 or 15 minutes.
So the assessing data is in a format that it can just be loaded into this system.
It is, but you just have to export it and then import it.
So it's kind of like, you know, bank statement stuff going into Quicken.
Yeah, probably,
Okay.
yeah. And there shouldn't be any scrubbing. One of the nice things that allows you to do is, because you can identify parcels that are like mismatched for it helps you identify where you need to do some scrubbing on the assessing end and say, oh, actually, like this system calls it map 2-00A rather than -A, which means they don't know that it's whatever. And so you can kind of help. It's like one more touch point for assessing to, oh, that's not, you know, we see there's a mistake here, fix it, and they can go, oh, yeah, go fix it.
Yeah, right now for us, if we wanna help. Someone wants to do it on their own, they gotta come in here. Pull the map and lot, they can get the map and lot files, like just the paper PDF maps online. But otherwise, you're coming in here, you're asking us for the property card, in which we'll export in a PDF form and email it to you, or print it out and provide it to you right then and there. Whereas this, you know, it's just they can get it wherever they are. You know, and it helps the staff, it helps the folks trying to do applications, and it helps realtors that are trying to list properties. Our staff work with realtors or title companies to get some of this information that, you know, could be available to them. Beyond this kind of like as I'll call more of a static like database, you know, we could also in theory be updating our own maps if we want to, or potentially some simple analysis on some of our projects that we have going. Public Works could potentially utilize it to map out assets, culverts and traffic lights and those kinds of things to have a file within the GIS program that we can utilize in other departments.
So somebody could enter in like all the points of the stormwater sewer lines, which are kind of mysterious.
Yeah,
That's not so much like, this doesn't help you do that, the editing stuff, but there's software out there. Like I got some free, you know, open source software that I can make the zoning maps or make whatever. If you want, and off to the side where it says layers, you can go over there and like turn on the left side.
On left,
Yeah, right, yeah.
And there's a lot of state stuff, wetland layers. and all
They're
that.
they're
So-
working on that, and that's, so I do use a decent amount of GIS, and we don't need to go off down this rabbit hole if you don't want to, but the state is working on getting it all updated. So more of this is gonna be around and useful. And I think that this is mostly to kind of show it to residents, give residents access to this information, and also it does allow us to quickly pull up and see which parcel it is rather than having to go through the paper maps. And you can search this and say, oh, where does Beacon, you can type that in, it'll show you all the properties that anybody named Beacon owns. So there's that.
So are these going to be annual costs then? Is this a subscription to this software and it runs in the cloud, or are you loading it locally, or how does that work?
The $7,000 is the initial setup, and then I believe what we're looking at should be just $3,000 a year after that. So that 7,000 would be the first year and the setup.
Okay.
Um,
I'm sorry, how much did you say a year after that?
3,000.
free.
Oh, okay, I thought you said 30.
No, sorry.
Michael.
Probably.
You are not kidding.
Not true. So that's the GIS. There is also, and one other thing I will say on the GIS is we can also, assuming we get some other things cleaned up internally, is you can put permits up there. So if anybody wants to know, like, oh, when was my septic put in? Like, they can go and find it in there, assuming we have the records to put up there. So that also is nice, because that means that, people come in here all the time looking for stuff and, send us on. It's not us, I send Leslie on wild goose chases, so.
If I may, part of the difficulty in explaining it is that GIS is a very broad term. There are people who are in there living as GIS specialists.
Yeah.
Okay, there are so many, a city, a community, we can put it in so you can go to a layer that just shows all the water lines, right? It's very, very broad, so some of the difficulty in trying to explain it, okay? The issue here is to what level are we buying the software we're purchasing is gonna give us what piece of that?
Yeah.
But otherwise, GIS system, we like, if all of this book was transparencies, each one showing another layer of the property.
Right.
And so it's what part do we buy for it?
Yeah, and a lot of that information is what the state has or the state's working on, and we can get a lot of it for free. And we can put as much on there as we want, but some of it's creating the data, some of it's making sure the data is accurate. I'll tell you, if you look at wetlands, it's close.
My understanding from the computer software purchasing from our conversations last year is that the strategic plan software was going to be purchased this fiscal year. And I see we haven't spent anything yet this fiscal year. Is it possible for us to make that purchase this year and reduce the ask for next year?
I think it's possible. I have to go back and just put my head trying to think, what was it?
Is that?
I'm sorry, I'm still on 13-38.
Yeah,
We
Oh.
had budgeted $5,900, and my recollection was that was going to be for the strategic plan software. And it looks like the ask for next year still includes that. And
So-
so I'm suggesting that maybe we make that purchase this year and drop the 2027 request
So that's
down to
the
10,000.
annual fee that's in there.
that 56,000 is
And we
5,600,
haven't paid
sorry.
it yet.
Yeah, I feel like.
It's probably later in the year, if I had to guess, I got wrote it down, but we'll take a look at it and see. My guess is that what you see in 25 there is probably, we're able to buy either a prorated amount of it, or maybe that was just a setup fee, but I have to go back and look in Trio
Yeah,
specifically and can let you know. But the cost that's there should be reflective of the annual fee thereafter.
Yeah, so, and just, at least in my head, there's the ClearGov, which I think is what you're talking about, Mary, which is related to the strategic plan that we bought, and I think we did pay for it. I think Amy's just gonna check why it's not showing up on the year to date. So there is that. And then there is Adobe PDF Pro, which $240, that's been on there, 260, I guess, maybe it's going up. JS is what I was just talking about, that 7,000, that is the setup and the first year after that would be a $3,000 liability. And then there is $3,000 in here for civic engagement for community projects, which I think we base that off of SharePoint, which the town used for the comprehensive plan outreach process. And we're going to look into doing that. That really is a way to allow the community to provide feedback and do more online interactive things. Not maybe like live interactive, but you know, people put dots on maps basically and say, yes, we want this here, or we don't want this here. So that I would say is largely for the comprehensive plan implementation, but also anything that the town wants to do some outreach on that.
Yeah, one of the big drivers we were seeing with that is there's the comp plan, there's the board's working through its strategic plan, you know, and there might be ways in which we can utilize that. So social pinpoint with the website that the comp plan utilized, and so that was the cost that was for that. It's not assuming that's the one we're gonna go with per se, but you know, there are multiple options out there for creating an engagement platform. And one of the big projects we're about to embark on, that we just kicked off, is the Business Route 1 planning project. For those that aren't aware yet, from the Information Bureau building all the way up to NC Hunt, the state's looking at making improvements for that stretch of Main Street. We asked to join the process because the multiple plans in the past have called for sidewalks and improvements to this intersection or improvements to this intersection, and they weren't looking at that with what they were going to do. Theirs was simple right of way and drainage. And so the board approved using some reserve money to put in for a planning partnership with the state. And we're working with Sebago Technics over the next 10 to 12 months to kind of envision with the community what they'd like to see through that stretch for improvements. And so that's one project that we know is coming up that it'd be great to make sure we've got the tools we need to make sure the community can stay connected and engaged with that. There's some housing initiatives or some other big things to bite on within the comp plan and strategic plan of the board for the next 12 months that this budget covers. And so this was just trying to think like making sure there's money available for us to buy the best tool that will make sure we can engage people the best as another layer, right? There's still newspaper ads and meetings to come to, but you know, we need to have some interactive, it's 2026, some interactive options for people that want to go that avenue too.
You know, there is so many ways to engage the public through, using computers and websites and stuff. But our town website is a real problem. I know you put money into it, but maybe it needed to be completely redesigned.
Again, it was just redesigned, but
It
Well,
was just
helpful to have input. on
It's
feedback.
so clunky. When I go to other towns all the time and I can find stuff and it's really bad.
So that's certainly a separate thing.
That's a
from the
separate-
budget, and would definitely encourage you to reach out to me one-on-one
Okay,
anytime.
all right.
To find ways where you're hung up or where others are hung up and where it could be improved. We can make those
Yeah, let's-
changes. We just need to hear from people when there
Maybe
are
we can
challenges
add-
finding things.
Can we bring people?
Yes. Just call ahead.
Okay.
Well, website
Make sure
party.
it's really
Yeah.
clear.
You can have people there too, Andy.
Perfect.
A question? The $30,000 projected increase in the department.
Yep.
Is that before we get a check from Newcastle for some stuff?
Yeah, so that would be, I guess that would be if you wanted to, yes. If you wanted to keep and make us just
some
appears.
offset.
Yeah, yes, that's, so, and we can look into that. I can tell you, if you give me a second, that 29, 30,000, okay, so I haven't, unfortunately, the spreadsheet that I use to do my analysis is not quite dynamic. But I think it's not helpful. Yes, it is the unfortunately the short answer. You know, I put in here for to expect $61,000 back. I'm still, one of the things I tried to do, and I'm not sure it was quite successful, is make sure that the Damariscotta and Newcastle stuff lines up just right, so that it's like for my continuing education expenses, that what I'm requesting here is half of what they are saying, because our lines don't line up, so I have to like cut it differently. So I'd work on that, but and I did check, and that's where that 61,982 comes from the on the revenue side, the first line item under revenue. That's basically offsetting some of that $29,000 increase.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest driver of the software and then the contracts with MCOG, which we would flag earlier on one of our sheets.
Yeah.
Those two alone are your biggest.
Yes,
Subscribers there really.
those are, well, and then the other big thing that hit, I mean, it's, I guess, relatively, maybe it's not huge, but it's the healthcare costs. Why not?
Yeah.
40%. Now, I guess half of that will be offset by Newcastle, but that's not, I mean, as far as when I broke this down, the like internal personnel, that was the biggest one. I had put it into 3 categories, which is like internal personnel. That went up by $9,300, which most of it is me, and half of that gets offset, which is, I mean, it confuses me a little bit, but so that's the other one, and then the MCOG, the site plan review, which is $16,300. That's something that you mentioned, fee schedule. That's something that should be able to be almost entirely offset by fees. There's no reason that what they're actually doing shouldn't be. I mean, you can tie it directly to an application and application review, which can be fee for service. So that's something that I've been going and looking at, and I haven't gotten to the end of it, but I'm trying to figure out just how many of these based off of our applications last year, if we update the fee schedule, what is that going to look like? Because we don't always track. Mike tracks the permits, and it's always when the permits get issued, but it doesn't always say whether or not it needed, like, the planning board to look at shoreline zoning, or if it just Mike could look at shoreline zoning and it needed the planning board to look at everything else. So you can't quite get to apples and apples, but so, like, the actual time doing application review for site plan, we should. Town doesn't have to take that burden on from the developer, from the applicants. So yeah, so that's that.
So can you just tell me what is it they're reviewing and they're helping the town review its site plan?
Yes, essentially what I've got, Reed is the gentleman from MCOG that's helping, is when the applications come in and once Mike looks at it and says they need to go to planning board for, we call it site plan review, but that's only one of the ordinances. Reed will go in and take a look at the application. He'll put together the document template that not really a template, but the document that I put together, get all the information in there that he can pull out, and then we do a little go back and forth between, like, what other documents do we need from the applicant, what all of the reviews that are going to be necessary, and he'll go in and basically half of it is to say, like, well, this isn't applicable. Unfortunately, the way our ordinance is written, it's like you have to go through the whole thing. There's not anything that says this isn't applicable, so you can easily just be like, oh, well, this is they want to do a cell phone tower and this is for a house. Like, well, these standards are not applicable then. So you have to go through and be like, is this applicable or not? And it's really for site plan review, shoreline zoning, if that ordinance is applicable and it's in the shoreline. There's a little bit of land use, and then there's floodplain. He does help with historic preservation, and there's also subdivision. So the idea originally when I went to Andy was like, can we bring MCOG in to help with this? The intention was to free up some of my time to clean up the ordinances so that it can be a more streamlined process and it doesn't take as long as it currently takes to review all these applications. And we're working on that. There's just, it's quite a bit to do, and the progress
Okay,
that I've
'cause I
made.
guess I thought that's what they were doing for us, is cleaning up our ordinances but that's not.
No.
Okay.
Job.
They're capable of doing that, we just had to set up that Michael's skill set is such that it might be more advantageous to have him work on the ordinance where he knows it more intimately.
Yeah,
But they
Yeah.
certainly could do that, so could Lincoln County.
Just-
But yeah, that's,
So what they're preparing the findings of fact and conclusions of law, right?
yes, yes,
Okay.
which, yeah, you are more familiar with.
So,
them than
okay,
Probably everybody.
and they're pretty extensive, but they don't need to be so extensive for every little project that comes down the pike.
Right.
And that's what we're working on, is so that that big scope of review is reserved for the more complex projects and not the.
Yeah.
Okay.
There have been several projects that have come through that. You know, someone wanted to put a painting studio in their house and it needed to go to planning board review. They weren't even building anything. They wanted to put this there and it's like, well. So when you go through site plan review, there's nothing really relevant for that review. So the planning board is like, yeah, okay, you can put a painting studio in your house if you want to, because none of the standards we're supposed to look at are really applicable here. So some of it's also fine, you know, if there are concerns about where painting studios go, putting them in there, but that's a whole other, that's a whole other thing.
well, then you got, you know, on the big scale, you got this.
Right.
The skilled nursing facility that came through the planning board, or started 2.5
Right.
years ago, whatever it was. I mean, that pretty well consumed the majority of the month.
Yeah.
The planner, I think it was Isabel at the time initially when it started. You know, and we're set up to have roughly 20 hours a week of planner. With Newcastle having the other 20, and so depending on what comes in for permit review for the planning board, like it could potentially eat up 2 weeks. of a
But you
month.
know, we have the potential in our ordinances to ask for more money from big projects like that, but we'd never, ever do.
For third party review.
For third, well, it could be MCOP, you know,
Yeah, well.
that could be the third party review of the plan.
Usually, but yes, you're right, it does. Usually, so I think. Usually those are for like engineers to do stormwater management review and things like that, which we have done a little bit. Usually we just send them to the Soil and Water Conservation District to have them review it and they just pay them directly. And so that's worked, that's fine. We don't get involved in that. I think if we should be getting more money from applicants for application reviews, that's where I think the fee schedule needs to be
Yeah, and just
adjusted.
really try to make it reflect the amount of work that it takes to review these really big projects that are
Yeah,
complex.
the fee schedule across the board and anything needs to reflect the time, you know, at the
Yeah.
very least,
Yeah.
it needs to break even.
But there's
Yeah,
such a discrepancy between the little projects and the big projects.
And I started that.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to like kind of ground truth and be like, well, if these were in place for 2025, what would our revenue have looked like? And there's some we get quite a bit because some of them are based on square footage. So if you have a really big project that's very easy and doesn't take a lot of review from us, great. But unfortunately, most of it is like small projects that are in shoreline and we have to find out, are you 2 inches too close and how many feet tall, you know, and you get into like all the little things. It takes a long time. Subdivision for one, it can just drag on and on and on. But I think with the fee schedule, we can address a lot of the like, we need more capacity. We should be able to offset a lot of it through fees, which ideally we could have an updated fee schedule for this fiscal year, but we'll see. I don't want to make any promises. Yeah.
Very simplistic thinking, my brain is very simplistic. Given the expenses and given that all of Newcastle expenses run through our budget, is that correct?
Well, for me,
I mean,
for your planning position.
Only for the town plan.
Yeah, they're sharing the personnel costs.
Right, for this department,
It's not, so
planning and development.
Like planner training.
Just for him.
Just his job.
it's really just like me, my salary,
Okay,
benefits.
so if I'm looking at other equipment and tools and
Mhm.
That's all.
Yeah,
the tool.
that's all, we
it's
don't,
Strictly Damariscotta.
Yeah.
So if I look at these numbers, I can't just say, well, half of that is actually Newcastle.
No, unfortunately. I mean, I could probably, we could probably work it out so you could see what the,
I just
Actual
trying to figure out
cost
which
is, but-
really our costs versus split.
yeah, I would say
It's the-
60,000, so.
Yeah, the planner salary, the health insurance associated with his position,
Yeah.
the training, which includes travel to and from, conference fees, membership fees to certain,
Might get my certification,
Those are all
EPA.
split between.
those, yes, are.
costs that are directly related to the position, Michael.
But it also shows in the money that they give us.
Right.
Yes,
60,000, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's about, that department costs about 160,000, not counting any of the revenue that we get for application fees and things like that. I believe.
But as a taxpayer, when do I see that?
Thank you.
All right, yeah, in other words,
You were-
we come together, we approve a bottom line number that establishes the mill rate.
Mhm.
I'm, through that mill rate, I'm being taxed for the whole planning department, right? I'm paying that. But then so is Newcastle.
So they get a bill from us,
Right, but-
monthly or bi-monthly, that Cheryl sends, these are the costs for Michael's position, we send them the bill, they pay it within whatever the
Okay.
warrant process. is.
But I've already paid for that,
Okay,
right? Well, you just said a tax bill.
I don't think, I think, so,
That's the
In the
confusion.
offsetting
Yeah.
revenue, Dick.
let me see if I,
There's offsetting.
the way that I state this, if it's correct, is, yes, so the planning department is planning on spending $222,000. And so, but because we're also budgeting for the revenue that's coming in, and we're expecting to bring in 125,000. We're gonna, when you go to set the mill rate, we're gonna do the math, and that comes to, I believe, $96,000. So that's what's, when you go to figure out what the mill rate is, you're gonna be looking at that $96,000 rather than the $200,000.
The net, not the gross.
Yes, I always get those two confused, but yes, I
Yeah.
believe that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that offsetting revenue is coming in, and you're doing the, yeah.
Well, yeah,
The
so it gets
amount that
factored
needs to be
in,
appropriate for taxes is based off of that, yeah.
right,
Okay.
yeah, it's no different than any other revenue stream coming into us that's non-tax, property tax related.
Yeah.
You know, the state needs to send us the reimbursement for DA or revenue shielding, or we need to collect the fees for, so. The process internally is we send the bill to them based on the actual cost incurred that previous month. And then they pay us, so we're not taxing extra, if that's what, you know, as Michael says, we've already reduced that burden. By showing the offsetting revenue on the tax calculation form and other areas.
All right, that helps me, I know that.
That's.
Yeah, it's on
Yeah.
page 35, the revenue.
Yeah.
Good,
Yeah,
yeah.
Why did you propose $14,000 more for the planning consultant on page
uh,
34?
planning consultant, is that for a total of 16?
Well, you had
1,003.
requested 16 and Andy says 20.
So I think there was $4,250 that was in there last year that we were gonna consider using for a study, parking study or housing study or something. I just rolled that into the $16,000 that I am requesting. I think Andy kept that 4,000 in there thinking maybe we do that parking study still. If that's, but I think those are the two numbers that are there.
Yeah, my note there is for, more for anticipating legal review of ordinance updates and whether we need to bring anyone else in to support other ordinance updates. It'd be about 50 hours worth of a consultant's time to assist in that process. There was no last year for the potential parking studies or some other, I mean, there's no lack of studies that are identified in the comprehensive plan to consider. And so a large part of, you know, this budget in particular can be directly correlated to some of the comp plan goals and endeavors and the board's strategic plan. So that amount, that 4,000, that's the difference, is to make sure that the department is supported in any other additional cost that might be needed to make sure we're making good sound legal judgment or might need help. At the end of the day, time is a limiting factor as much as it is what we can afford to do if we want to try and get it all done in that time frame and anticipate it. So just trying to make sure the resources available to proceed as the town was seeing. Even that could be higher, certainly depending on the timeline you want to get it done in. We're trying to be modest in the timeline.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, moving on to a different question, is that okay? The line 6295 comp plan support. So this is to pay the Highland Institute Fellow. So 2026 budget was 15,000, but we spent year to date $30,800. So
That's where the MCOG service fee hit and then our accounting system.
oh, okay,
I'll just need to journal that most likely over to the consultant line. The expense is still the same, so we paid for the whole year up front. That was accounted for from a carry forward. Which was an unspent, the board through the charter has the ability to carry forward funds for projects or services not yet completed. We entered into that agreement with MCOG for review back in May or June last year. And so because it hadn't been spent, we used to carry forward from the unspent balance from that department in this fiscal year for the payment.
okay, but this person was hired,
Contracted, yeah. the service fee,
contracted,
yeah.
and then you're looking to do it again next year.
It's a 2-year fellowship. And,
Oh, sorry, I was,
you know,
the fellowship is.
yeah, if the $15,000 is the fellowship.
Yeah.
And then if that's what you're talking about, that's why we budgeted $15,000 last year, $15,000 for this upcoming year is for Emerson. And then that, the reason that it's $15,000 over is because, it's for the MCOG assistance. And so last year was at the 6295. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's on a different line this year to continue with MCOG. So it's.
Okay, yeah, no problem, I just thought, we've already spent twice as much as we budgeted for this year.
Yeah.
30,000.
That's, 15 was unplanned for, and then I think we're throwing it on a different line this year.
Okay.
And I would say that Emerson's definitely comp plan support. And then I would say with MCOG, like if we didn't have that, this is more of my time going to application review, which just pulls me off of something else, which probably is mostly gonna come off of comp plan. So it's like having Reed to help do that just frees up more time to, I think, go towards comp planning implementation. So however you want to slice that.
Any other questions for the planning or Michael, any other points to make on that?
I was kind of wondering about the planning consultant contracted services, for,
What's the number?
um, 9096, is that below 9096 on page 34? We talked about the $4,000 discrepancy, but it just seems we have Island Fellows, we have MCOG, we have you. Why do we need a consultant?
The,
The left page.
yeah, this
It's on
is,
page 34.
you said planning consultant under contracted services.
Yeah, for.
And that is MCOG. And then there's a little bit for potential studies if we want to. That was, well,
Okay.
in mine, I just budgeted the 16,300. Andy has 20,550. That includes, I'm speaking for Andy here, but that includes ordinance updates or study of some kind. Is that extra 4,250?
And at the end of the day, we've got staff for X amount of time, period, right? And so it's trying to meet the expectations again of the board strategic plan for the year, the work plan and the comp plan as it was approved by the voters in 24. In needing to try and find that balance. If you want progress and want these things to get done, the budget needs to
Yeah.
allow that. So the 20 hours a week that we roughly have Michael for, is finite, right? And so needing that, identifying where we're falling behind, he does a great job tracking time and where he's spending it in certain things and We thought the best bang for the buck was to have someone help with the site plan review, which was the MCOG contract. And let Michael focus on the implementation of the comp plan and the ordinance update stuff. And so it's
Yeah,
just
I-
a matter of, do we get it done, or how much can we get done in a year, and needing the support, what that might afford us if we don't have the funds for, say, the MCOG contract. Michael's time gets shifted back into some more site plan review and less comp plan implementation and ordinance updates.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Anytime. If anything comes up that you do want to question before we wrap all this up, please just let me know.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
The other big one in there, the administration, back on page 20. And I'll hit some of the high points on there and see what other questions might exist. Page 20, line 1338, software licenses, that's up about $4,000. So $6,000. About half of that, $3,000, is a hosting fee for the web-based Trio software. It's our municipal software. Fortunately, it's kind of the software for main towns to use. We are always keeping abreast of what other companies are trying to break into this municipal software field. But we now have a web, like I could right now pull up access to our accounting software, or our tax database, which is fantastic. It's kind of a cloud, not even cloud, it's just web hosted, versus before it was on our server and you had to be in the building connected or remote in. So there's some improvements within that. That said, the cost for them to host is an extra $3,000 a year. And then an additional $3,000 is just the annual increase in software costs. They're about 3%, 3 to 5% a year, it seems to be, on their hosting, on their license fees. So that whole increase is related to the municipal software. Other notable changes, page 21, line 26. The audit, financial audit services were required by law to do these annually. We were in a 3-year kind of contract period where the price was locked for 3 years. It was that way of the first 3 years before that. I believe that was about 7,500. The new price, we were in at about 11,000. We try to put feelers out. There's not a lot of, Cheryl, we'd mentioned at one of the previous meetings, there's not a lot of firms out there that are taking on new clients. We have a good firm. Last time this came up, we reached out to one of the other more local firms, and they just weren't taking on additional clients. And so the board decided to just get the number from this other one. It went up for $3,500. That was a win in the grand scheme of things from what we hear from other members out there. We're anticipating an increase, as it should be 3 years later. Board hasn't finalized that. I do believe it'll be on your agenda for next week, though.
Okay.
And we're pretty certain if we go forward with the same company, we fall within this line. The difference between the two is my proposal accounts for the possibility of having to do a single audit if we receive more than $750,000 in federal funds in 1 year. We're required to do a single audit. And the additional cost for that, I think, was the difference, $3,500.
Are we anticipating that?
Yep. Parking lot project.
Good.
Yeah, the parking lot project, I mean, it's already happened, but we had $1.2 million in that one fiscal year, so.
But that was before. Are we anticipating?
It was before, but the audits don't happen until after.
Okay.
And so trying to carry that cost, there's other grants that we're going after. We did get awarded the CDS earmark monies when the transportation bill was funded. That's another $850,000. That won't be for another few years before we see that come in. So as we get those grants, just know that there's other costs and other costs associated with getting the free money.
No such thing as a free lunch, right?
Yeah, so that's the only difference there.
It's my understanding that auditing through the whole state has become a real problem.
Yes.
And that there are a number of towns that have not been audited in years.
Yeah.
And while it's more money to spend, that's a dangerous place to be,
Yeah.
I think. And it's no mistrust of the staff. It's the simple fact that you go through and in the course of a year, you make books, you make little mistakes and things have to be realigned. And I don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our ability to get audited.
Yeah, simple thing, state law, we have to do it, and so these are just the cost of doing it.
Or have to do it, but there are a lot of towns who haven't done it because they can't. They simply can't get auditors to do the work for them.
We mentioned health insurance is up, based on the policy, the personnel policy, we contribute a certain portion, percentage of the cost for the premium. 13.27% is what it works out to be. We're budgeting 13.5%, for the fiscal year, 9% is what we know for calendar year 26. Hopefully it's not that high in fiscal year 27. But that's the cost associated with that based on our policy. It's a minor decrease in the travel and meeting expenses there on page 22, 60/60 and 60-61. Just some of that, a good chunk of that is attributed to just knowing that we don't have as much of that cost associated with the staff training for the travel portion of that training. And so that was recommended to come down a little bit, still supporting the training and making sure it can happen. A lot of it's daytime and you don't have to spend the nights kind of thing. There are a couple, once a year or so, there's usually a multi or at least one overnighter. So we make sure that folks feel supported and continuing to learn, but so much of it since COVID is they're able to just do from here, or it's just a day. So we're still supporting that in line 62-62 on page 23. Memberships and dues is up a small amount.
Why do we have Amazon Prime?
We order a lot of stuff, and that provides access to quicker shipping and lower prices in some cases. Do shop around if we can buy it locally, whether we need it now or can wait an extra day or 2 days. We'll determine that. Sometimes the price is just cheaper if you take the time to shop around in other places, and Amazon happens to be a place that things tend to be cheaper, and they come here quickly. Tech support, not much, just a minor decrease there.
Where's that?
Line 70-10, the bottom of page 23.
Website build maintenance fee, $20,000.
Yep, so the annual fees for all the services we have for the website are about $15,000. The additional $5,000 is the build cost spread over 3 years. They gave us that option. With the cost of the 15, we get the website and the support for that every year. There's an ADA compliance component that's required now. It's about another, it goes about $4,000 a year. Just for the ADA compliance, so there's an audit trail of where things are non-compliant, when they get fixed. If anyone were to challenge us on the ADA laws that our website's out of compliance, we have that support. We need to document the improvements, the changes. This was generated by the federal government. We don't have an option. Towns have been sued, companies have been sued for not having ADA compliance.
So who does our website? I mean, is it that part of that program that you bought back here on page?
Under the plan.
Trio.
Yeah, the trio.
No, Trio is just an internal municipal software system where it
Okay.
runs all of our accounts payable, our payroll, all the assessing databases through that, budgeting books are through that.
So this is,
That's kind of the standard for the industry, is Trio.
okay, but this program that we have our town website locked into, what company is this?
It's called Civic Plus.
Civic Plus?
Yeah.
Oh, we saw that, yeah.
So there's the website, just like the core cost of having the website hosted with them and support that comes with the ADA compliance. By add-on that they have, that'll kind of flag where there's ADA non-compliance, and then it can be corrected. It includes a 311 system, so that got launched recently. So if say there's a road complaint, just the simplest one, folks can go online, fill out the complaint form, and it goes to whatever department we've mapped it to that's most
Actually used
appropriate.
it. Out of curiosity. It worked.
Yeah. The nice thing about it, I mean, it's a cost to it, but the nice thing about it is it's not a piece of paper that can get lost in an inbox. There's an audit trail to it. You can see if I have not responded through that system. It can hold accountability, transparency. It creates a kind of a map and visual of where the problems might exist. So say it's potholes, then we can visualize where those are. You know, and it could be, I'm trying to think like code related, maybe there's a compliance issue on a property and someone doesn't want to call or stop in here. It's like, you can just send it anonymous, or you can break an account and have your name tagged to it.
I'm a staff member on the phone.
Right. And it can happen any, so you don't have to be open for it to happen. Then we can follow up, and again, there's an audit trail of who's doing what when. And then the other piece to that is this mass communication system that we bought into that allows people to get text message updates. We used it, we were able to launch that right before the parking lot project started. And most of our folks that have signed up were trying to get updates about the parking lot, and we could utilize that.
There was a big ask for that.
Yeah.
Communication, yeah.
And so those are kind of the website and 3 other add-ons is what for the $15,000. Another nice thing about Civic Plus is, you know, if we wanted to add other things, other modules, there's other add-ons, features. Some are relevant to be interested in, some are not relevant for what we do. But to know that we can stay with the one company and just keep expanding and adding on other useful tools is nice to know. The same goes for the software we're using for the comp plan, the ClearGov. There's other add-ons that we could add there, so we're not having 10 different companies and softwares to look at, so they can be more integrated with each other. We find value in that internally.
And individuals in the town office can upload stuff to the website, right?
Yeah, at the time, everyone that was here when we did this, upstairs at least, received the training on it. We're gonna be doing another round because we've had a few new folks added and some people just want an update. So we're trying to get another 2-part training session lined up. The idea is that departments can update their pages, and it's not just Becky or I that are the only ones that know how to add anything.
Yeah.
We're trying to make sure more folks know how to do that.
Is it basically a content management system, DNS? I mean, are you filling out like forms to update stuff, or are you actually doing, you're not doing HTML or anything?
We are
like
not
that?
writing script, thank God.
No.
You know, I'm not sure technically speaking what the best, how to say that, but I mean, it's pretty easy. There's widgets and you can go into the widget. If you want to add say, an agenda for a meeting, you go to the agenda center and you add the document and it gets posted wherever it needs to go. So they've done all that back mapping for us. We just need to go and add the document and say, add it to here.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than same company, but they had to update their platform. If anyone that's worked in the website stuff, they were using Drupal 10. I think it was, which was becoming obsolete, not gonna be supported anymore, so they were forcing us to at least go to the next upgrade to that. We went a step further. Included in this price that we have, there's an update in year 4, which won't be this FY 27, I think it'll be in calendar year 27, maybe the latter part, and so it already includes, what they were finding was a lot of towns will do the big expense, make the update, wait 6 or 8 years and be well out of date again with what kind of the norm is. And so they said, we're just gonna build it into the price. You're gonna get in year 4, you're gonna get a refresh. And I think it was even an upgrade to the next level. I can't remember what that involved, but they're building that into their prices now. But yeah, to the point earlier, we can look at modifying and improving things if there's just things aren't working well, and we all agree that we can make that. We just need the feedback from folks.
Yeah, it has a lot of good components.
Just,
It's just,
The only other notable changes through there is just the overall increase in total compensation with all the positions. Included new line in there, though not proposed for funding, 90-54 on page 25 for a finance or grants manager. There will come a point where, function of time again, you know, we need to make sure we can stay on top of all the grant administration. You don't just get it and do it. You gotta report quarterly, sometimes more frequently. There's deadlines you can't miss, tidying it up. And so acknowledging that staff that are here, not that we can't do it internally, but making sure the workload is balanced in a way that it's happening or we're not just putting off something else. We are attempting to get as many grants as we can for the projects we know we want done. But this is kind of caught up to us and at a point where we're sacrificing some other things that
Well, I was gonna ask you, like, so you were the lead on most of the grants or?
most of them.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot.
90/50.
It's also-
I know it's a lot.
90/54, yeah.
I'm not proposing we fund it right now, I'm just putting it in there as like, we talked about it.
Okay.
The discussion item.
It might be something that someone flagged, "Oh, it's there, we're not
Right,
funding it.
right.
It's just more of, I'm putting it out there as something you might see in the future.
If it was like 10 hours a week or something like
Right.
that, right?
And the idea I
Because
had
we
would
can't
be just
possibly
for,
continue to do it and run this town too.
Right, no, it's a lot.
If you have a good grant person, they can pay for themselves.
oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Where's the planning board compensation?
The what?
The planning board compensation?
That was in the planning department.
I just didn't see it, okay. And also the same with the FICA and Medicare, is that also placeholder?
What
You
number?
don't have a request in your. You don't have a proposal
Line 8188.
on 8188.
You see zero there?
What's the
Zero.
question?
I see 26,955.
Yeah.
There's $26,000 there.
On the online has zero.
Oh, our paper shows it.
Yeah,
Paper shows.
Yeah, it's zero.
So they.
online has zero. You see it?
I haven't pulled it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you let me know which version of it you're in by chance? I have two up
I'm in
there.
the one that was on the website today.
Yeah, there's two there.
Yeah.
It's just because I made an update to the page 4, and so I made sure everyone knows that there was one version that came out on the 4th and another one that came out on the 6th. They're dated. They're there. That shouldn't have changed. So I'll know they can go back and double check. That should have been, that's a formula driven cell. And so if there's numbers that are included in the wages, this is just time point 76.0725.
Different version is correct. I don't know.
Things get wonky digitally sometimes. Any questions, relating to the administration line, the revenues we talked about briefly related on page 26, related to, interest on the accounts? And probably the most, significant one that's potentially the most uncertain. We can project, kind of a cash flow, to understand like what we expect the balance to be based on terms, in any projects we know, but, otherwise, it's just a matter of with a rate, or an interest rate tied to an index, we just don't know what exactly it'll be. Yeah. Conservative. It's small, the line, a couple lines below that, the RD, not the agent fees. Sorry, scratch that. The fund balance allocation.
I'm sorry. I'm just reading. I thought I read this page and I didn't. We don't have a fee to renew a license, a liquor license?
I know, I asked that.
Is that it? I must have been out, sorry.
No, we were waiting to get it.
Well, it doesn't
No,
seem
I-
fair that we charge the marijuana people, but we don't charge the alcohol people.
Well,
Is it a state?
we can revisit it. I mean, the fee schedule needs to be revisited, but a lot of it comes down to what the actual staff timing is for it. The liquor license renewals they don't take any time at all. They're like,
So no time money comes in, seems like a win-win to me.
well, yeah, we can revisit them, but.
So we did talk about creating an ordinance for all businesses to have an annual business renewal fee. And if you go to towns like Brunswick, depending on what your business is, you can pay up to $2,400 a year just to renew the business.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's-
Camden, I think Rockland as well, so.
Wisconsin has a version of it.
Yeah, but you gotta balance it out.
And there's
So there's plenty of precedent for us.
Yeah,
There's a balance of what do you wanna charge for businesses coming in,
So-
so.
We have
Yeah.
plans to develop an ordinance for business charges annually.
Based on number of employees or.
We haven't developed the
There's
ordinance.
so many metrics you could use, yeah. You could-
one of the long list to do, and if some things come up, it's just been shifted off the top of the list.
It's at the below the basement level of planning right now. It's not even. Yeah, we're trying not to fit that into Andy's
I mean, it's there, I gotta shift it around.
Yeah.
I'll just share the way I'm envisioning and proposing fund balance use, the undesignated fund balance, that's on page 26. Right above property taxes. My recommendation is to look at utilizing that for shorter term costs. In this particular department, the example would be, we have one more year for the website build cost, that $15,000 that was spread over 3 years. That's not a cost we're gonna have next year, and so I'm suggesting that we look at using the fund balance to finish paying that off. Look at using the fund balance to pay for that kind of not recurring single audit fee. But just my recommendation, not to look at it as oh, we have X, let's just lower the tax burden, because that's a revenue source that you might not have the following year that might create some significant impacts the following year inadvertently. But I think it's smarter to maybe try and think of using that for kind of these shorter term, more acute. You'll see in the planning line, looking at using it to offset the cost of the Island Fellow program expense. That's a 2-year program. Unless we want to talk about, keeping that as staff capacity and continuing that expense. At the moment, looking at it in a 2-year, what it was, the 2-year planning commitment to the position. The idea was to help us get over a hurdle or kind of expand capacity in a way that, like, the competent implementation was the focus. Okay, there's a big lift initially. Let's have some support to help us really get that off the ground and get a good system in place.
Shouldn't that be in the reserve as opposed to in the budget?
Well, reserves are typically for kind of more capital like related type things, or it's an operating expense. Is I think I and probably the auditors would view that. But just as a fundamental, like, that's where I'm coming up with and why I'm coming up with some of those amounts in the fund balance. The way it's done in the past has been when it comes to commit taxes, and the Board of Assessors do that, which is a select board. They just look at, well, what's the mill rate gonna be? Is there any other way to get that down? The only other way to bring that down is to use a certain amount of fund balance at that point. And so it becomes well, this year we want to do $200,000 instead of 150 because it gets to the mill rate you want it to be. What happens next year? Do you keep it at 200? Because at some point you might not have a recurring amount of money that's needed to maintain a healthy fund balance. Any other questions in that? Oh, yeah.
The payment in lieu of taxes.
Yep.
What number?
Which line?
She's on revenue.
26,
26.
01. I mean,
Pilot,
01.
yeah.
We just, at one point, it looked like we had a lot of, some paint pilots, and then what happened?
We didn't have a lot of
23 and 24, at least some.
we didn't have a lot of entities paying in. The biggest change that's happened since the 24 at 6,300 is Midcoast Community Action no longer owns the apartments on Piper Mill. And they were contributing a certain percentage of basically the revenue, is how I understood it, generated from the rental.
2% of the revenue or something like that,
Right.
So is that still untaxed? I mean, is that still a nonprofit?
I'd have to go look. I believe it's a for-profit entity.
For-profit.
Yeah, it is now.
Yeah, for-profit. So it went from being nonprofit,
I
no
mean-
tax, and having a pilot, yeah.
I think it's pretty crazy that Miles doesn't pay anything.
Yeah, I mean, most recently,
There's an LD something or other that's trying to look at service centers being able to charge taxes to nonprofits. It's pending.
yeah, it's a state statute thing. The state statute outlines there's certain exemptions from taxation from real estate, and it's following that. The pilot's a voluntary payment. You can't obligate yourself to having to do that.
But I think just even just an ask, would certainly be worthwhile.
Ask our senators or.
Or just
Kind of the plan, Jenny, that we've, again, keeps, moving around on staff time, but yeah, there's Andy, we've talked at the board level about, approaching, as far as how it would look at, and, or what it would look like, and I don't wanna speak out of turn for you, but one of the conversations we had is instead of just saying like, hey, offsetting taxes, like, where do you, to get a better buy-in? You look at projects that are happening and how does that pilot go into this project, for instance? I can't get a connection right now, but I know Andy's talked about that quite a bit. I'm like, how do you get somebody to buy in a little easier than saying, hey, just, pay something and it'll go into to offset taxes, but actually going into a project, which in turn would offset taxes. A little bit more of a connection for them.
Yeah, the way some towns have tried to approach it, again, the voluntary pilot payment, is to share with those entities, property owners, what their share of the municipal cost is for what their tax bill would have been. Because they are still serving those municipals, have access to or are receiving those municipal services directly. So it'd be roughly 40% of whatever the bill would be. And they might get some replies. I asked Rockland about it last year when we were looking into this. Last year, we had a summer intern working with us in part on this. The idea of getting something out before the end of 25 to the entities. It didn't function in time. It didn't happen. In lieu of asking them to straight up just pay the money. I mean, most nonprofits are facing the same challenges with where's the money coming from, the uncertainty of funding sources now. The alternative to that would be, if not a direct pilot payment, could you partner with us on all of these initiatives we have and are trying to accomplish? And so that we don't have to create a staff position or create a new program that someone else might be delivering. Could you partner with us in delivering or expanding maybe what you are offering to help further our comp plan goals or board strategic vision?
That essentially is what the CAP agency did with the Piper Mill. All right, over there. Is that you approached us on that? We were not paying anything. And when we had a conversation about, there was some costs to the town who are being there. And we came to an agreement. We, at the time, I was on the board and to put some money back here.
Yeah, I remember when you came to the book, yeah,
Yeah,
came to board with that.
so we
yeah.
came
It
and
was
said
like
that we
50% or
would,
something, yeah.
we would be willing to do that. And then, as I said, the property changed hands from us to a for-profit operation. So at that point, it became moot. In terms of miles, they used to give us a pilot. And I was
10,000?
I was
Roughly?
yeah, of that nature. Yeah, it wasn't a lot, but
Yeah.
hey, $10,000. I was sitting where you were when 1 year suddenly they didn't. And so I actually had their finance director in here to talk to us about what happened. And his response was rather astounding. He said that their attorneys had advised against it on the premise that if they every year sent us money in lieu of taxes, they could break through their non-taxable position. Okay. And it would, so, yes. What?
Yeah.
So at that point, we all did sit down though and start to take another look at fees for police response and so on to at least try to cover, because of course what we're after is the cost of servicing them. So there were some adjustments made in that regard. I don't know where that stands right now, but
They don't,
It's
yeah, I
not
don't think
broken
they
out
use
of
the,
anything in the
they
budget.
use a lot less now, because the fees were adjusted in the last couple of years to reflect. what they
yeah,
actually
well, I
did,
think it'll show up on the police department
Yeah.
line.
They don't use them.
You just don't call the police anymore.
Yeah, they have to sit on like a psych patient or something down there for hours and hours, so you have two officers on and I can't remember the last adjustment, but they had to adjust the fee for that, and Miles said, oh, okay, well, we can do it, I guess.
And in view of that,
And they have.
in that view of that, it always stands out in my mind as a generosity on behalf of the church that every year gives us a pilot.
Yeah. Is
The
it along the way?
mid-coast, in along the way and mid-coast, Bruce, I'm gonna get it wrong. You wanna unmute yourself, make sure I get it right. Mary meeting mid-coast or?
Midcoast Conservancy?
No.
Mid-Coast Friends Meeting of the Religious Society of Friends, the Quakers.
Good, thank you.
They make a donation, I think it's about 250 or so.
That sounds right, they've sent a pilot in for years.
450, I think.
Yeah, it's been there for years.
And along the way has made a donation the last couple of
We've gotten
years.
1,000 so far this year.
And it's just in view of an operation like Miles not wanting to give us anything, it sort of stands out in my mind.
Well,
So
they
it's-
have Schooner Cove, they have all those
And they-
fancy residences down there.
Yes, there's portions of the property that are exempt by law, and there's portions of the property that are not exempt by law, and they make payments on that. I will say, and it should be known that if folks are unaware, the town was able to partner with the hospital. And they invested a significant amount of money in that road project down there for the culvert, in the road work. And it's a town road, they weren't obligated to have to do that, but I think it was over $250,000 that they contributed to that cost to lower the tax burden.
Well, they would have had to have a ferry, you know,
It would have been on the town 100%.
Well, we would have had to fix the road, it's a town
We would
road.
have had to
They
pay.
that's
partnered-
a town-owned road.
They
that
partnered with the
access-
town
Yeah.
to make
Mile
those
Streets.
necessary improvements.
Wow.
Mile Street Towns, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would have been all on,
Huh.
yeah, would have been all us.
Oh,
So that was a case where it worked very well. They had, Andy and the engineers, what they partnered well with.
That was all mapped, it was all before I came, it was already in the works.
You get it set up, that's right.
I was here when it happened,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
and
Mac
Mac was
got
the
it
one
wrong.
that worked with Midcoast MCMA. So I think that's where you being a little tactful and acknowledging that there's some uncertain times for some of these groups in terms of where some of their funding's coming and they're facing big cuts.
Yeah.
And that was where, is there a softer landing to say, can you partner with us on these things? And the intern was trying to map their mission and their purposes with the comp plan goals and what we were trying to see done. And it's just a matter of taking the time now to match those to craft the letters to each group. That's kind of where it sits.
And in fact, that's why it was phased too. We needed, the lower section was done first, the upper section done, we had to work around Miles' fiscal year. So they had to, in their budgets, that's why it wasn't done all at once too. Part of that, yeah.
So I think we continue to build on those and in the absence of big projects, we, at some point, we'll try and get a letter out. To which we could get nothing extra, to which we might form some new partnerships and expand certain things. But
Does the
Maybe
town,
the main health lawyers are nicer than the old Miles lawyers.
does the town
Yeah,
get
okay.
reimbursed for forest land? Did I see that at True Tech?
we do get some reimbursements in the assessing budget. The state sends some reimbursement for the tree growth.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
Looks like it's about $12,000, give or take, it was 14,875 this year so far. He gives one time payments.
I
there is
had a
some-
question on this page. In the comments for the $5,000, is that also, first of all, is that also a placeholder on the undesignated fund balance? I keep trying to read
What
that
number is it?
comment. And I can't, is it missing a comma? Is it my reading it wrong?
Administration.
On page 29.
You're in 29 in revenue, okay, assessing.
29,
Jumped into the-
undesignated
Oh,
fund balance.
Yeah, you're done with tree growth and then.
Right, because you brought up the
Okay.
tree growth reimbursement.
Yeah. Covers it, potentially.
So it covers an unknown and potentially
Yeah.
inconsistent value for legal
So-
services associated with assessing it by an employee.
Yeah, so we're jumping into the assessing one, I just wanna.
Oh,
Dick's comment.
sorry, I thought you were
Yeah.
there.
Nope, to Dick's comments earlier, it is now past 6 o'clock, I just wanted to respect that check-in you called for.
How many more?
What do we have left, just assessing?
More than I anticipated at this point in the.
Solid waste.
But I think there's, the assessing is the next big one, in terms of multiple pages, and then the rest of them, there's like 3 or 4 others that are one-liners.
Perfect, let's
Let's
bang
vote.
it out.
Do it.
Great.
Yep.
Let's get it done.
So
Okay, Bruce, keep going.
Yeah,
if we're feeling okay, the assessing starts on page 27. We have a contracted assessor's agent through RJG Appraisal. We primarily have one of their staff members assigned to us, Ed, if you haven't met him yet. Rob does come about quarterly, he's one of the owners of the company. He'll be here about quarterly. They do all the, say, day-to-day, about once a week. That they're here. You'll see there, it's line 91-31 on page 28. That's the bulk of this, of the $52,000, 49,000, and almost 50 of it's contracted fees. So you can see there's a brief in the comments there, brief history, the last couple of years of what their day rates are. And I'm timesing that by 65 days, so it's 1 day a week plus time for spring work. which is, you know, as of April 1 of every year is the state's tax year in terms of what's on the land and what's to be assessed for taxation purposes. And so they call that spring work. Is sometime in middle April, May, they'll go out and take the permit list we've issued from the previous year, go out, visit the properties, what progress has been made, anything that was unfinished from the year before, they'll follow up on, is this now 100% complete? And then they'll update the assessing database to reflect those values and those percentages. So that accounts for about an extra week's worth of time roughly. And then the additional days on top of that, we've been trying to get our personal property records updated. Last year, I went through and shared with the select board that about half of the businesses in town aren't not in the personal property tax roll. Some of them might just have low values and might not end up with a bill at all just because of that. Some of them might qualify for Betty exemption, in which the state will reimburse us that lost revenue, so to speak, once it starts getting taxed. Right now it's zero. So we need to make a significant effort to get that updated. They did is they took that list and mailed everyone that wasn't in the system that we believe should be reviewed and should submit us a list of all the business equipment that's in there. I mean, if you're a retail, you got shelving, that's taxable, according to the state law. If you've got refrigeration units, that's taxable. You got car lifts, that's taxable. Some of those might qualify for the Betty program the state has. We're not making up the rules, it's just the law is the taxation, and because we have so many already in it, it was becoming really inequitable now within our community for those that aren't getting a bill at all. We had one grocery store getting a personal property bill, and across the street, the other one didn't. And that to me was one of the most glaring ones. Whether we agree with and suggest that to the legislature that they should change personal property taxation, that's a separate matter. The fact those inequities exist and we're not getting what should be coming to offset the tax burden appropriately, that's not happening right now in some cases.
So they're gonna go through and do that?
Yeah, they sent out all the ones that they could, trying to remember off the top of my head, I mean, probably 50% of them came back undeliverable. Which requires them to either track down a better address or go physically to the building and find the owner or the manager and say, we need you to fill this out, please submit it. And they need time afforded to them to do that. So that's some of those extra days there. If you do the 52 plus 5 plus another 5, and it leaves room for a couple extra other days around tax commitment time for them to come and do additional work. The biggest difference between the department request and management proposal. I mean, I did both of those. I'm putting out there, not suggesting it, but under the department column, you'll see there's staff costs and not contracted service costs. And that was solely me just thinking and raising the question, this is the cost, almost 50 grand to have about 1 day a week available to the public. I don't think we're hearing a ton other than certain times of the year where people want more availability. But running out as if it was a staff person, you know, working say 20 hours, maybe here 4 days a week, it creates more availability. The biggest risk I see in that is you'd be looking at going from contracting the services to an entity that kind of owns the liability and comes with cumulative 150 or whatever years of experience in-house to a staff person that maybe has minimal experience doing it, but is qualified to do it. And so you lose some of that, you'll see an increase in the cost of legal fees for that, potentially acknowledging that. That's line 91-32 in the department request. Right now it's 0. They are a fantastic resource when it comes to legal issues. They work for about 70 other towns doing the assessing duties. And then they do revaluations on top of that. So they're well versed. I'm not proposing we switch it. I'm just putting it in there for anyone that's kind of wondered, you pay X for 1 day a week. Is there a question about access? Do we want to look at it a different way? This would be the other way.
That position paper.
And you'll kind of see with 20 hours a week versus 10 hours a week, you know, what that bottom line looks like. It might be a little bit cheaper, but you're gonna want it to find someone qualified and able to do it and potentially take the risk that they don't have the experience, depth, and knowledge that we currently have access to. Just an exercise in kind of stretching that.
And you fully expect that whatever they assess, they're gonna bring in there, they'll bring in enough to more than cover the cost of them.
Do what?
I don't know that I see it as a direct off that per se. I mean, it's not like a fee for service.
What I think she's saying, do you have any revenues in there based on the success of them going out there, all these companies?
Oh, I see what you mean. The time in to get those updated.
Or the personal property in
Yeah.
particular,
It depends. There's some accounts that are gonna be pretty minimal and might be below a threshold. I think the state, one of the things they're trying to do this year is increase that threshold of, you know, what would be exempt on the personal property side, because they hadn't moved that number in a long time. I wanna say it's like anything less than $1,000 of value is exempt. Which in today's business
we're
world.
in business for less than $1,000.
Well, it's not the cost to run the business.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
the
buying
personal
the
equipment, yeah.
and whatever, I mean, like,
Yeah.
there's so much now that it's just so much, so I think they're talking about raising it to, I think, $5,000. So if a single item is less than that, it wouldn't be eligible or taxable. And so it might find some businesses that run on a computer and, you know, take a small salon with one chair in it, that one's probably gonna be exempt, from the personal property, still get a tax bill if they own it. One of our challenges, I think, if for those that aren't aware, you could set up a business and open up in someone's property. And we'd have no idea, other than seeing a new sign pop up or just being a small town. There's no registry of deeds transactions that alerts the town or anyone that this business started operating here. If they don't come in and get a permit or ask any questions and don't have a sign out there, we're none the wiser.
That's one of the reasons we wanted to create an ordinance to have them, you know, register.
Register
pay fee. But we spent 9,000 already. Do you have any anecdotal feedback on whether or not they've got anybody who's, you know, step up and pay?
I can find out, I don't have that number. Again, just a couple of kind of what I see is. These aren't required by law to say these must offset the assessing fees, but tree growth reimbursement, that's monitored by the assessing department. I kind of assumed and kind of put that offsetting revenue against the assessing department. And that comes in, veteran reimbursement, organization reimbursement, another one that doesn't have any outlay with any other department. They fill it out, they acknowledge it on the valuation return forms to the state. We're spending that time doing it, so anything that comes back from that, I kind of booked off and ran against this. The $5,000 the department request for the fund balance was the legal fees. It's one of those, we might spend it, we might not. And just kind of earmarked the $5,000 to kind of from the fund balance to cover that legal expense. And if it wasn't spent, it stays there. If it was spent, it came out of the fund balance, and you might not spend it the next year. In the first year, it'd be kind of a big question mark. So the majority of this department is well, 2/3 of it's taxation. Any questions, additional questions on this testing? Skipping ahead, page 36, solid waste. And it is what it is, trash has to go somewhere, either you pay for curbside pickup. Or continue working with Middleborough Jefferson Transfer Station. At this point, we're 2 months into their new year, operating year. And the board just approved signing the agreement on 2026 to continue utilizing their location and services. Kevin and I attended the annual meeting early January, mid-January. Of the transfer station, because it does operate its own separate council of governments. It's just those two towns, Jefferson and Middleborough, that operate it, but they've created a council of governments to utilize this shared entity and operate. So Bremen, Newcastle, and Damariscotta are able to have trash from their communities go there at a rate determined by that board. Period. We can go, we can listen, we can ask questions, but those three towns do not have a vote in how that structure is assessed and the fees that are assessed to our town. And so we had asked this year if they'd be open to expanding the council of government to include the other three towns. So that way we all had a chance to have a say and vote in how that structure is set up and assessed and how things are saved for future capital projects, you know, and the whole thing. And so the output of that was they were gonna go back to the respective select boards and have that conversation to see if they'd be open to that conversation of expanding. But beyond that, is what it is.
Yeah, but and it's reflected in the minutes of that meeting. That those two towns are what they are on the board because they own the property. If we want an equal seat, we're going to likely have to take some ownership in the property.
So who did the analysis that was found on, that you included a lot of information?
Yeah, sorry, it's a
And so-
small one line. I included everything that came out of the annual
Yeah,
meeting
no,
this
no.
year, for those that might be
It's
interested.
fascinating reading. Actually, it is kind of interesting, but like, for example, on page 58.
58, yeah.
So who did this analysis? Yeah, 58 of 100, 108.
So, this is what Kevin brought with him.
Oh, so Kevin did this.
I believe this was it. I was working up a different one, but didn't provide it at the meeting. I had the information
Okay.
with me, in case we got into a little bit of a conversation about it, but Kevin actually presented this analysis, page 57 and 8.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of identifying what he considered as kind of the problem, so to speak, or kind of what it is now with the two towns based on their agreement.
Yeah.
From years ago, and then page 58 is kind of what he would project out to be now the cost share essentially.
Using that formula,
Using that same
census and
formula.
evaluation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not quite how it's assessed now, so I won't try and explain it. I'm in the weeds on that one. But it's one of those, we don't have control of the cost. The costs are going up every year about 8%. I'm concerned about the lack of funding, the capital needs that they've identified, that management identified there. And not sure who's gonna expect to pay that. Ultimately, it'll trickle down to anyone that's being charged to go there.
Yeah, because you read through that report from their, whoever the site manager is there, there's an enormous amount of deferred maintenance as well.
There's a lot.
And, you know,
Yeah.
capital
enormous
stuff.
amount of what?
And they don't make
Deferred maintenance.
deferred maintenance and capital needs as well. I mean,
It's a lot.
It's not good.
To Bristol? You see if maybe.
A few years
what they
ago,
could offer us?
so a few years ago, my understanding is the town said, we're gonna go to Bristol instead, and Bristol said, we don't have room to take on another town.
No.
Yeah, they're not.
They go back to.
They go crawling back.
Yeah.
It is something, when the two select boards in Newcastle and Damariscotta met back in the summer, I think it was, about the idea of a joint public works. Newcastle Select Board was also interested in throwing on the table the idea of, like, in the future, you know, should they also be considering their own transfer station or a shared one potentially, separate from the agreement they have now. And it hasn't thrown any significant legs other than to say, if we find ourselves looking at property for a public works garage, let's just not think of the minimum needed for the public works operation. That's of a 5-acre piece, maybe it's a 10-acre piece that would allow the town to expand on site, that need in the future. That's about as far as it's gone on this, the select board's discussion.
Yeah, I think, you know, between, I can't speak for Newcastle, but I think we're all on the same page where we all feel a little more comfortable if we had a little more buy-in with the current situation. You know, it is still relatively inexpensive, you know, for us to get, you know, to do what we're doing, but at the same time, you don't really have any control over it. So at what point does it go from being, yeah, it's a cost, but yeah, especially with their capital needs, you know, you're looking at their capital needs and they really don't have any capital outlay for.
They don't have any reserves.
They don't reserves, so it's no reserves. So do we, when the time comes for a, you know, an $80,000 piece of equipment, does it, who gets to pay for that?
Well, I mean. What about like recycling and working with Lincoln County? Doesn't Lincoln County have recycling?
Yeah, the whole borough Jefferson Transfer Station does utilize their facility for some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the stuff over the years, like the brown and green glass is not recyclable and, you know, there's been problems with cardboard, but. I know other towns like Rottingham have made a real they really control what the residents can throw away. I mean, they really,
And what do you do with the rest of it? You can't
Monitor.
throw it away.
well, no, I mean, what I mean is they charge
Yeah.
for, they have, they charge people more for, like you could throw away a certain amount for free. And then over a certain amount, it is costing per bag or something
But
like
this
that.
rate structure seems to be based solely on population.
This is
not
what-
on.
There's no incentive
Trash.
for recycling.
No,
There's no
not yet.
incentive for trash reduction. There's no incentive to reduce the amount of trash that's being thrown in that transfer station.
The next annual meeting will be next January.
I know, I meant to go, but
I mean, what you're talking about does kind of go to, if you had your own facility, at whatever that expense would be, you'd have the.
We have more control over it.
Responsibility of managing that, but also maybe working in an effort to reduce consumption in what gets.
I mean, it's kind of the state used to be really into reducing trash and recycling. They had all
Well,
kinds
that's
of
what-
grant programs and major initiatives,
That's
A lot of
not-
it changed,
but that's
the
not,
end user changed on a lot of that too, like there's no place for it to go, a
Yeah,
lot of that
but
stuff changed.
China-
Well, China won't
Yeah.
take it anymore.
Exactly.
That's
So the
when
plastics and stuff,
recycling
there's just
changed.
there's no place for it to go, yeah, so they don't,
Right.
sure, a lot of that stuff is. Yeah,
Hey,
so you see
so it
like
goes in the
paper going
garbage.
all into one thing and, yeah.
Shari's got her hand up. Chair.
Oh. Really?
Sorry.
Oh,
I don't see her, but I see her hand.
oh, I see the hand. Hi, Terry. What's up, Jerry?
You have to, you're on mute.
Muted.
What?
Think she just saying,
I don't know.
I don't know.
She went upside down a
While
while
she-
back.
While she works on that,
Yeah.
the cost there is anticipating what they're gonna go up in 2027. And just based on the trend of what it has been, you can see this year, we're at 202,530, with a potential increase of 9%.
I think Sherry has her hand up now.
222,000, in FY 27, and that's just.
not anymore.
what page were you?
I know, we just,
What page were you just reading?
Okay,
Sherry?
36.
hello. Yes.
Right.
Just trying to figure out how to unmute. As far as the transfer station, I just had a very large project for mold remediation. And so when I was taking all the extra monstrously large trash over to the transfer station, I was charged extra for all the ceilings and the beams and everything that I go over there. And it was about 3 weeks worth of extra fees. That's it.
yeah,
You're breaking up.
For the charge for demo, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do charge for them.
Are folks comfortable moving on to the next one?
Yeah.
Municipal building,
which page?
page 659. There's a few more than just the one or two lines there. The biggest change there, 78,470 this year was budgeted, 117,430 is proposed. $35,000 of that increase is the EV charger, which we've talked about. Another $1,000 roughly on line 1895 for the janitorial services, anticipating they go up. These services do each year. That expense there. Sorry, that one is for this building. 18-34. On page 59, that's the janitorial services for the bathroom specifically. And that one, I do believe the 41,865 that's in the department request does reflect year round.
Well, it says April 1 to December
Yeah.
31st. Instead of November
Sorry, yes.
Yeah,
So
April
right now,
to
that's an extra
November,
month, and so the request last year was to go an extra month, sorry. There was a request at one point to go year round, I think a couple years ago I put that number in there.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Going through December 31st was more about trying to get through the holiday shopping season and reflect, acknowledge there's a lot of people downtown still until the weekend before Christmas usually. And so rounding it out to the end of that month, And there'd be, I think it allows for 2 cleanings a day, just because in the winter time you're tracking in salt and snow and water and trying to keep that in good condition.
Public restroom, so.
I'm trying to keep that in good condition and manageable for cleaning purposes, so it stays the best it can. That's the difference between those, is that extra month. And other than that, there's minor increases in sewer and water that were anticipated. We did it just to replace one of the heating units already, in the boiler room. Whatever reason it failed. Electricity,
No.
a slight increase in the electricity. Again, rates continue to go up on that. Otherwise, the biggest driver there was the EV chargers.
Yeah, well, I was just on 1831. And in your note, it says contingency for unproductive solar generation. So what does that mean?
It's when if the array goes down.
So right now we get electricity through that solar array that we have?
Credit, yeah. Bill
We have
credits.
credit,
Yeah.
okay,
And they're good for X amount of 12 months or whatever, from when they were generated.
okay.
And there's definitely been periods where it's down. The rate we pay right now for grid power, I think, is 11 cents a kilowatt hour, and the rate for the power from the generated from the solar is like 12 cents a kilowatt hour. That could change in a year when our 3-year lock on the market price changes. I think when they were built, about 85% roughly of the town's need, municipal government need, was covered through what was built out there.
Okay.
And there are periods where it's down. That's what it is.
Credit proof.
Yeah, we're not paying anything extra, but we're not paying that price either. We're having to buy grid power, which right now is about a penny less.
So we buy that
Kind of
power
like we have
on the,
Really
It's owned by a separate entity. We don't own the infrastructure.
but we provided the land for them to build it on. So what do we get out of it?
Fixed, for the next
Oh,
25 years.
that's more than what we pay.
A price we know. Yeah, I mean, the nature of the energy market, I mean, is what it is, and it's so unpredictable. What you know through the solar is, you know exactly what the price will be for the power it generates for the next 25 years. And unless you buy out the project and then own it, which there's a price for, it's roughly $75,000, I think, right now. If you wanted to buy them out and not pay any power costs. Otherwise, we were obligated to buy the power that generates. And they've defined that price every year, it goes up a little bit more. That might be an old note. I don't remember adding it since I've been here. I haven't taken it out either. I mean, the electric costs are.
Well, there are times when it's pretty unproductive, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I do think one thing I have to look into, it's possible and need to just verify it's not the case that because the previous EV charger was tied to the same meter, making sure that we are in the rate structure that we should be based on now that it's just a bathroom. The EV chargers that are there now have their own separate meter. And so I just double check and make sure that there wasn't a significant power draw or demand that bumped us into a different category, but otherwise, you know, that's what the power's been costing us. It will come down a little bit on that line. Because that set of chargers is not there. It looks like it was about an extra $3 to $4 grand a year to have the EV charger in use. But that's hard to determine as well. It was all part of the one.
Yeah, there's no way to regulate, tell what that was using.
Yeah, there was no output or data like we have now with this current system. We can go in there and run 15 different reports for any period of time. We can see who exactly made a payment for that time of use, and it's a much different system. As far as the offsetting revenue, the chargers will generate. I mean, the expectation is a minimum of what the cost is. Best case scenario, we're able to bank some money and put it into a reserve, which will likely be, creating that reserve will be on the town meeting warrant.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I think we need to get through the first year. If we're saddled with a fixed rate every month for having the demand to meet our power needs. There could be a fixed cost of $1,000, say, a month. And so if there's low usage and low revenue, we're still stuck with that ability to have access to a certain minimum kilowatt hour as they manage their network, the power grid. So that's the part we haven't been bumped into that yet, so we don't know exactly what that's gonna be.
But we do have the ability to tweak how much we charge.
We do.
The electric car owners.
And so we'll keep an eye on that.
First year is gonna be a lot of data points.
Yeah.
If folks are okay, the next page, 61 contingency. This is a very small percentage of the cost of operating the town at $20,000, proposed to fund unanticipated expenses. Essentially, it's a very small percentage. And we attempt not to need to use it, but you'll see there are years where we've had to use it. For some lines that are under budgeted, and look at streetlights and traffic lights is one that came up recently. We budgeted $3,000 for maintenance on traffic lights, and they gotta come twice a year, also, and that's $5,000. And so we can use the contingency to cover that additional expense. But let's try to keep that a reasonable, lower number, but we do need to have some contingency to be able to keep things going. The alternative would be get the cost, wait for whatever the impact is to have a town meeting, but the town meeting pull money from the fund balance in the middle of the year. That could take an additional 2 weeks while whatever is down is down. And so it's not a large enough money that still creates that. Hopefully there's still trust in the board and being able to utilize those unbudgeted things. Legal services, page 62. Proposing bringing that down slightly. When we went into last year's budget conversation, I think there was a contract, possible contract issue that at hand. We have somewhat regular communication. We do probably utilize MMA the best we can. Their responses have been sometimes more recently a little less than adequate. But we do try to utilize that service. We do pay for that to be a member. They do have attorneys on staff. We do use that as best as can. Otherwise, we rely on colleagues who maybe have already asked the same question to their attorneys. But it is an amount of money that we have to have available for whatever kind of comes up. Whether it's a full request that we need help on, or some other strategy that requires legal review or an ordinance update, potentially. We have multiple contracts. If we ever find ourselves in a dispute of a contract, we're gonna want to utilize the service. A small reduction in the current year. Insurance, this is more the general insurance. There's a couple of departments that have the insurance costs earmarked specifically for them, like in the police department and the fire department. So this is your general property casualty insurance, liability insurance. At the moment, we are showing the firefighter liability in there, and it's just a matter of whether we move it over or not into that department. Public official liability.
So I had a crime coverage question.
Yeah.
The comment says certification have allowed for a decrease in this expense. And I mean, really, I'm gonna quibble over $37, but
It was a certain.
565 is what we budgeted before. 620, according to Sister Lee and Veronica, is more than 565.
The 4646.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where
when the police department became main law enforcement accredited.
Yeah, no.
There was I can't remember, it was 25% reduction in that premium. But every year the prices go up a little bit.
That's right, she's asking, the note says it decreased, but it didn't, it increased.
Oh, sorry, that would have happened last year, I think.
And again, it's $37, so I'm not really gonna hold
It
up
probably
the
goes back to the
meeting.
2023, they got certified in 23 or 24.
Yeah.
So it's 533 and it's gonna come down from,
It's only,
Yeah, I don't
good
think
for-
so.
it's only good for 5 years, and they have to do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Three.
Ooh.
All right,
I don't
public
think we're gonna get
officials,
another
moving on.
reduction.
Right.
The note.
It might go up if you don't.
I want that in the.
Yeah.
Any questions on the insurance? General assistance, another state mandated program, that we have to administer, they do reimburse us for, I think it's close to 90%. Or no, it's 70%. 70%, there is talks about trying to get it to go to 90%. And even that still doesn't cover the administrative costs of us having to administer the state required program. For us, it's relatively low, thankfully. There's a lot of, I think, nonprofits that have filled the gap in voids for people. But there's some other towns out there that have departments dedicated to staffing the needs, like South Portland, Lewiston, multiple staff available just for GA stuff. So there is, like, within the Service Center Coalition, of which we're part of, there are talks when these bills come up to try and make sure that there's consideration for at least funding 100% of the cost to towns for providing funds to access basic needs. And at the very least, you know, those towns, but I think for some of them, it's such a high number, they want to have some of that administrative costs covered too. So, but that is what it is. Last year, or for this year, that we're in, we proposed utilizing Philbrook funds, to support the, as the family intended it and left it and worded it, the worthy poor. The Philbrook fund, as we refer to it, but that, it seemed to make sense. But that,
Good idea.
it's a small amount of money generally, and so, it's got a pretty substantial balance in there and other things we can help do, but it takes that burden off the general tax base. Yeah. Think that was all of them. Yeah. Right for the extra hour.
Now we know.
Time, get it picked off and then we'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, public safety, you'll have the police chief and fire chief, Lord willing, barring any significant emergencies. Try and get through those. You've already heard about capital, I think, from in both cases, so. Yeah.
So tomorrow's chief, police and,
Police, fire,
Police and
EMA,
fire.
Emergency management,
Yeah.
hydrants.
Chief.
One other
And Mary, as you observed, the fire one can go long.
I was just saying to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, fire can take a while.
Yeah, I mean, out of fairness, it's
For
because
instance.
he gives us so much information.
Very comprehensive, yeah.
It's very comprehensive.
Yeah, together, so.
Well,
Good, we have any,
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second from anybody? Second, all in favor? Aye. Sherry's waving her hand.
Dan and Andrea, and then.
Yep.
Very good.
Oh, you want to introduce a second?
Thanks, Jerry.